Hey everybody, Mary Fran Bontempo here. And before we get started with today's show, I just wanted to let you know that my new book, From Broken to Brilliant, How to Live a Brilliantly Resilient Life, is available on Amazon. Super excited about this book, which provides a roadmap of how to live a brilliantly resilient life. You'll get advice not only from me, but from so many dozens of our podcast guests who were kind enough to share their tips on how to reset, rise, and reveal your own brilliance. So head on over to Amazon, get a copy of the book From Broken to Brilliant, and now let's get on with the show. Welcome to the Brilliantly Resilient podcast. What's your train wreck? Everyone has one. The question is, are you just visiting or are you going to live there? I'm Mary Fran Bontempo. Join me and let's learn how to come through those train wrecks, not broken, but brilliant. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Brilliantly Resilient podcast. I'm your host, Mary Fran Bontempo, and today I have with me Dr. Toni Warner. Now I have to read her little resume here because there's a million things, so I have to read it to get it all right. First of all, she's a mom of five. By far and away the most impressive part of the resume. Mom of five, licensed trauma and relationship psychotherapist, success strategist, and mental health consultant for professionals and organizations with over 16 years of experience. She is also the founder of Authentically Me Psychotherapy, the CEO of Bold and Balanced, which is her professional development company. And she is the author of Reset, a High Achiever's Guide to Freedom and Fulfillment, which, as you can see, I have dived into. I have notes all over the place, and I'm a little bit scared because I think she can see into my head. But anyway, Dr. Warner, thanks for joining me today.
Oh my goodness. You do not have to call me Dr. Warner. It's my pleasure to be here. I'm excited to chat.
I am too, because you and I met about 2 months ago, I guess it was. I was actually speaking at a group that you happened to attend. And when you're a speaker, you're always looking out and hoping that you see a couple of people nodding. And you were nodding. And it wasn't until I found out that you were a psychotherapist and had written a book called Reset, which is what I talk about all the time, that I thought, oh, okay, now this makes sense. This is why she's right there with me the whole way. So much that's in your book and so much that we've talked about has resonated with me. But I guess where I really want to start is, how did this start to resonate with you? How did you get to this place where you realized that, especially, and I'm not singling any group out, but high achieving people, people tend to think everybody's got it figured out, and we don't. We don't. But how did you get to this place where you realized that this was a need that needed to be addressed?
I would say I'm pretty stubborn, so it took more than one knock on the head for me to to listen.
Hands up, everybody.
Right, right. And I'm a lifelong learner, so I'm not going to pretend like I have everything figured out and everything is peachy keen 100% of the time and my life is smooth all the time and I know what I'm doing all the time because none of that's true. So that being said, I was raised in an environment where there was just not the emotional support that I needed. And it's not any one person's fault. It was the nature of the situation that everyone was dealing with. But what that meant for me was I took on the role of the fixer, of being the glue, of being the figure outer, of being the strong one. And I say air quotes, right? Because I always looked strong, but I didn't always internally match what the outward expression of me was looking like. I call that outward success, inward mess, that kind of, feeling mismatched. And so it showed up in my life a couple different ways throughout my lived experience. I struggled with mental health when I was younger and no one knew. I mean, no one knew. Really, really good at hiding it. Really gifted student, did great with grades, social butterfly. So I looked like I was put together. I looked like I was good, Goldie Graven, but really I was struggling. I struggled with depression, I struggled with anxiety, I struggled with bulimia, cutting, a variety of things throughout my upbringing. And as I got older, I continued to take on more and more and more and more and more until at one point when I was in college, I hit this place of, have I just done it all? Like, have I just done what I'm meant to be here for? And is there nothing more for me to do? Have I just fulfilled my purpose? And so I wound up hospitalized as a result of that experience. And it was a rude awakening for me because the hospitalization was not helpful. It was harmful. And being in the field that I'm in, at the time I was studying being in that field, I had a flame reignited underneath of me that said, you need to keep going. This is information for you to know that there's more for you to do in this world. Like we can do better. We can do better with mental health. We can do better with supporting folks with mental health challenges. So that really shifted things for me, but I still had more healing to do. I still had more growing to do. And then I unexpectedly got pregnant with my first when I was a junior in college and became a single mom when I was a senior and walked across the stage with her on my hip a couple months later.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, straight into my master's degree, my first master's degree, and continued to have life lessons. But I will say that where the reset for this particular book truly started, where I could like pinpoint this specific reset, is when I turned 30. I had achieved all my lofty goals. I earned my doctorate. I had multiple advanced degrees. I had a salaried position where I was paid well and I liked the work that I was doing. It was in the field I wanted to be in. I had my third child at that time. I owned my home. I was married, right? All of the American dream, but I did not feel fulfilled.
Hmm.
And so that leaves me begging the question, right? Well, if I've done all of the things I sought out to do, and I have all of the things that we're supposed to have, right, for this sense of fulfillment, for this success, for this pursuit of happiness, then why don't I feel fulfilled? Why don't I feel that way? And that right there is where I can really poignantly say a different reset began in my life. And
Hmm.
that's where the book starts too, right around that point.
It's so interesting to hear you say all of this because I think particularly as women, um, we we naturally fall into certain roles. We naturally fall into that whole nurturer, if you're a mom, you're the mom, you do the mom thing and all of that. But I think we look at those outward things, those outward achievable things as our badges. I did it. I did this. I did that. I did the other thing. And we think like, well, everybody else had all this stuff and they're all marching around happy. How come I'm not happy? I did the things. Air quotes again, the things. I did all the things. But I don't feel like that's not feeding me. So there's this disconnect. Clearly there's this disconnect. How did you determine then what the disconnect was? Like, did you put a name on it where you could go, okay, this is what's missing?
I didn't know. I didn't know. It was a feeling.
Hmm.
It was a feeling. I didn't know exactly at the time. I wasn't like, "Oh, I need a reset," right? It was a feeling, and bit by bit being willing to acknowledge that feeling rather than cover it up or push it down or ignore it. Being willing to create space to explore what that feeling might mean for me. And that did ultimately, it took me towards the path of entrepreneurship, which was not a goal I had set for myself. It wasn't something that I was like, oh, yes, I want to be an entrepreneur one day. I want to start a private practice. That actually was not on my list. But that's the direction it took me. And when I went that direction, I began doing more and more self exploration, as many of us entrepreneurs tend to do. We don't realize that when we go down the road of entrepreneurship, we're also going down this road of self discovery and self exploration and self healing in this other way. And so that's what happened for me. And it's just bit by bit unfolded from there. And it shifted the way I was willing to show up for myself in my life, which then shifted the way I was willing to show up in relationships in my life. And it was bit by bit by bit that I allowed kind of the next step to unfold without having to figure it all out in advance or plan it all out in advance, was which was a big shift for me because I had this 5, 10 year plan that I had set out and I did it. I checked
Yeah.
every single one of those boxes, right? There's just, but the boxes are checked off, and now
Right.
what?
And now what? And I think too, particularly when you are a high achiever and you have the plan and you check off the boxes, because we are so intent on making that thing happen, whatever it is, we kind of clear the road, make sure everything else either stays out of the way or whatever, because we want to get that thing done. And we get it done, and it's there, but then it's just there. And I think there's not much room because we're so focused for the evolution of things. We don't allow for the evolution of things because we're so focused on our goals. And this is why I feel like a lot of times trauma comes by as this, as you said, the smack in the head to go, yo, wait a minute. Here's what you need to do with this. Since you were so focused on getting it done, you don't know what to do with it. Well, I'm going to show you what to do with it. And we go through those challenging times, and it was the same thing with me. This the stuff that I do now had its birth, had its germination in my son's addiction, which
Mhm.
certainly nothing I would have planned either. As you said, I didn't plan to be an entrepreneur. I didn't plan to, do this kind of work. But there is a measure of having to let things do the thing, but then let things evolve. Now, do you find that's a common thread with a lot of high achievers? Because we're gonna get this done, and then we get it done, and we're like, uh-oh, I don't have a plan now.
Absolutely. I mean, that is the catch 22 because so for me, it's not that I didn't realize earlier on that I had become addicted to action, essentially, but I didn't want to sacrifice my drive. I didn't want to
Right.
sacrifice my ambition because to me, it was like that's what I have to offer the world. Like that's how I can show them, prove to them that I'm of value in some way or worthy in some way. And I had to shift that inner dialogue with myself. But that's hard because when we can tangibly say, I did this thing, I accomplished this thing, I can show it's easier to show the world. It's easier for other people to see it and to acknowledge it. But because we're working towards the goal and the goal alone, we're so outcomes focused that we do not enjoy the journey, or at least not nearly as much as we could or would like to. And that is that catch 22. We're not saying, and I think that you would agree, but you'll chime in and tell me, we're not saying that it's bad to set goals. I still like to set goals, right? It just becomes unhealthy, even toxic, if we are living only for goal achievement and not for the in between, because the
Hmm.
in between is what makes up most of life.
Right. Yeah.
Right, like that, those smaller moments, those in between moments are what make up so much of our lived experience, that if we are not present for it, if we are not slowing down to pause and enjoy it, we are living from goalpost to goalpost to goalpost, and it will never feel like enough because it actually isn't. The
So
experience in between is what helps make it feel so meaningful.
we're constantly playing the football game without taking the time to build the other parts of ourselves that are necessary to be a whole person. Now, I don't want to say the problem with that is, but the problem with that is the high achievers are like, oh my God, like one more thing that I have to do and I have to think about because I don't know about you, but introspection is not my strong suit.
Mhm.
And again, it's because I'm focused on other things. But the problem there, and this was where a couple of your chapters really resonated with me, and why I wanted to get to this. You give some really simple ways to get at that. And that's, I think, what's important because most high achievers, I think, don't want to go into that space, that ephemeral sort of woo woo, how do I feel space. But what you said, one of the questions that you asked in your book was, how am I generally being? And I was like, Wow, that's a new way to look at it. Like, how am I being? So, explain to me what that means and how that very simple question can open up that conversation with oneself.
Well, let me ask you, what am I doing versus how am I being? How does that sit differently with you when you think about
It's
it?
two entirely different things. It's two completely and utterly different things. And I've been struggling lately with just a lot of overwhelming things, and I'm still doing them, but I'm not being very centered or healthy or mindful in my own place. I'm doing what I have to do, but I'm not being the person I want to be in
Mm,
that. And I think that's the intention of your question.
yep, yep. Because we actually wind up sacrificing or neglecting some of the deepest parts of ourselves when we get so caught up in the doing,
Hmm.
because it becomes about the doing and not the being. And we are human beings, right? We're meant to be. And there's nothing wrong with action. It's just we cannot live for only action. It completely takes away from us being a social emotional species, which means we need interactions with each other, right? We need relationships. We need it's those that's the heart. That is the heart of our experience here on earth that makes it so incredibly purposeful and meaningful. And we're just neglecting the parts of us that need that. Not just want it, not even just crave it, but actually needs that.
Because the downside of not allowing yourself to take that step and that look at yourself is burnout. It's the point where you feel like nothing you do is enough. There was something that I wrote down here, and of course I can't find it because I have 8 million notes about you, but it was something about there's so much action as doing as much action as you possibly can do still doesn't feel like enough. You still don't feel like you're doing enough, even when you've completed every single task in the day. Going back to your point about not feeling fulfilled, just because you're completing the tasks doesn't mean you're fulfilled. So how do we then make that connection? How do we continue to be active and involved, but link it somehow with what we need in terms of feeling purpose?
I think first part of that, one of the first parts of it is to begin to accept that it's not one thing that you can do, right? Because
Want
that's
it?
that exactly that's what we want it to be. We want to add it to our checklist so we can get it done, right? If you just tell me what it is,
And
I will
I'll
do
do
it.
it. I'll just do it. Just tell me what it is.
Yes, yes. And so that's why one of the first things is accepting that this is not about adding another thing to your checklist that you can just do and be done with and like, mark it off and that task is cleared. It is, it truly is a different way of being. And if we can look at it from that standpoint, those simple micro steps that we can take become practices that we can embed in our life each day, a little bit at a time. Not these huge major milestones, not the huge major goalposts that we have to set, right? Not these things that we have to push ourselves so hard to get to. It's a different way of approaching how we are even just looking at living today, just today. Just how am I looking at living today? Am I looking at it as tasks, a list of tasks that I need to get done, and then finally can collapse my bed tonight and maybe get some sleep, maybe not, depending on if I've got some insomnia going on or not, how much my mental clutter is, or how much my kids need me, right? Only to just do it again the next day? Or is it me looking at the day saying, yes, yeah, I do have things to do. How do I want to show up for myself today? How do I want to show up in this particular segment of my day while I'm with a client, while I'm with my child, while I'm with my partner, while I'm with myself? How do I want to show up and experience that part of my day?
So, so when you say micro steps, is that one of them to ask yourself that question? Like how do I want to? is how do I want to show up and how do I want to feel the same thing? Or are they part and are
They're
they
connected.
okay?
They're connected, but how do I want to show up is really grounded in our core values. And
Okay.
people talk about values as though it's something that you value in life. Like I value my family. I value, that's not a core value. Yes, that's something you value in your life, but it's not a core value. A core value is how you value being and showing up in this world. How
Okay.
I value showing up as me as I'm navigating this life. I value showing up as a person who is compassionate, who has integrity, who can experience and offer forgiveness.
Hmm.
These are some of my core values at the core of who I am and how I show up. It's not about what I value outside of me at all.
So this then, and I do talk about your values and your core values a lot. So is that exercise of identifying those few things, I usually say three, get like three things um, that speak to who you want to be in the world and bring those with you to every experience. And maybe you develop a habit of, is this, is this fulfilling that? Am I being compassionate now? Does this align with my integrity? Like, how do we put that into practice?
Even the language, who I want to be in this world, can become problematic because who I want to be can then typically be thought of as the way other people are seeing me, like
Uh,
that who, as opposed to how I want to be in this world.
okay.
A super simple way to begin with this is so I created a template. It's completely free if anybody wants to download it. It's what I call an intentional scheduler template. And it can be used as a one pager. It does have a second page for like notes and stuff if you want to do that. But it is a one pager that you can use to actually align yourself with your core values while also still holding space for the tasks that need to be done for that day. And it's super clearly outlined. Actually, I have mine right here that I started writing in today. Well, let me turn it to a blank page just to make sure that there's no confidential information. See, so it's just like this. And it's backed by science, psychology, and soul. So it infuses those three together, which is like my personal trifecta of what's so incredibly helpful for us. And it helps you be able to ask the questions you need to ask each day while acknowledging the schedule that you have, right? And also remind you of what you need to take care of for yourself.
This,
It is so it's
this
just
is a great, I mean, people
one page each day.
people talk about, I definitely want to get a link to that so that I can share that with everyone because when people say, "Oh, well, just journal," and again, I think to myself, "Oh dear God, I write all day. Like, do I really feel like journaling?" But something that gives you a framework. And I think that that's the challenge again for people who are busy and achievers and all that. We have a framework, we have a plan, we have a schedule, we have a routine. These other things don't naturally fit into that. It's not the way the world works that you get a sort of a, I don't want to minimize it in any way by saying a checklist for how you feel, but that's what's helpful for people like who are high achievers. Give me something to look at that can focus my brain on that because that's how we're used to working. So I think the resistance that a lot of people feel to that kind of thing is I can't get into navel gazing right now. I don't have time for it. But that's not what this is. This is maybe you take your 5 minutes in the morning while you're having your coffee or whatever and go boop, 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 and just write it down. And that's part of what people also say when they say setting an intention, correct? For the day.
It can be, yes. And you can set your intention for the day with this as well. But you're saying something that's so, it's like, I wish we could have a whole other conversation about it because I feel very strongly about it, is we need structure and we need flow. And the way that that may look is different, right? So this, if folks, so I have a cup in my hand. The size of this cup means that what I can put in it, the water that can flow into it is going to be held differently. It can hold more or it can hold less. While this, if I had a larger container, then the boundaries, the structure of that container is going to allow for a different flow.
Mm,
And
okay.
that makes sense. So our intentional scheduler gives the structure so that you can flow within that structure in a very intentional way. Some people need a tighter container because the flow is overwhelming. They're just so used to rigidity, but too much rigidity is not healthy. So we need the structure that allows for flow, not continued rigidity.
Okay.
Well, other
It's
times,
about an adaptability, going
yeah,
back to the point of evolution of allowing your day, your resources that you have within yourself that day, because let's be honest, that can be very different from one day to another.
yes,
So it's about allowing, taking note, for example, I guess, of what you are entering the day with, making sure that's aligned with how you want to be, and then figuring out how the tasks fit into that. Is that, am I following that correctly?
it can be looked at in that way. But another point you have to
You
understand,
hear me going back to, give me the plan, give me the plan.
well, that's it. It's not cookie cutter.
Right.
Right? So that's a major point here is that it's not cookie cutter, but there can be a framework. And that's what the reset is about too, is to provide this framework, this roadmap that you then can customize
Hmm.
to you. Because it is going to look different for each of us, even in different seasons of our lives, right? Me now having five children, the structure and flow that I can have in my day is very different than the structure and flow that I needed 10 years ago. It's different, and that's
Hmm.
okay. That's okay.
Yeah.
Right?
And I think we have to allow for that because, again, I say this all the time, but, I don't always follow it. We are organisms in the truest sense of the word, and maybe more highly evolved in some ways than other organisms, but nonetheless, organisms. And that means there is a natural flow. We have a natural flow that we are sometimes just trying to jam into spaces because of our expectations and what we think society's expectations are of us. So let me shift to that question for a minute. Are we thinking that society expects more of us than it does? Have we, a lot of us, built this up in our own minds because we are like, I'm this resilience person. Well, I always say, like, my husband will say when I'm complaining about something or whatever, he'll say, you should follow this woman online. Her name's Mary Fran Bontempo, and she talks about, and I say, she's an idiot. She doesn't know what she's talking about. When I get into those places of, it's hard. Like, in other words, I'm human too. Just because I believe these things and put them into practice doesn't mean that every day I snap my fingers and go, up, I'm that person. There she is again. So, how much grace do we need to give ourselves? And how much is internally the pressure and the societal pressure? What are we feeling here? What are we up against?
We do need to give ourselves grace. I often find myself repeating to myself and to clients that I work with, we need some space for grace. Let's practice some space for grace because we often can be very tough on ourselves, right? And so we need that. That is to offer space for grace allows for that adaptability, allows for that flexibility, as opposed to the rigidity, right? When we're trying to stay in this one lane and have it our way or try to control it all, it creates this really rigid experience, which is actually not how we're supposed to live. And that creates tensions in our body, tensions in our relationship. It's not ideal by any means of the word. But the question of, is it society or is it us is a very loaded question because it's like what came first, the chicken or the egg?
Right, right, right.
Right? And the reality is that our perception absolutely is informing our experience. And our experience absolutely informs our perception, right? And because all of us were born into different experiences, we naturally are going to have some unique perceptions. Society at large does have some overarching political and otherwise messaging that can be very loud, very in your face, or very subtle and still very intense in its experience that can affect groups of people in significant ways. And so there's that shared experience, that shared perception that can have some overlap too. So I'm not so sure that it's helpful to identify which came first or which is to blame. I think it's more helpful to identify right here, right now, what do I actually have control over? What do I actually have influence over? And am I going to choose to focus on that? Or am I going to be focusing on that which I don't like, which I can't control?
I say so many of these same things in different ways. I mean, one of the things I say is don't look for reasons to be offended because you're going to find them. They're going to be out there. And to the point of the word blame entering the conversation, I think if we do focus on that too much, it becomes too easy to focus on, well, why? Well, why did this happen? And then that shifts the focus from what we really need to be looking at is regardless of why or when or whatever, this is what is in this moment. This is what I'm experiencing. So, how can I deal with it and what is within my control? What can, and I always emphasize and capitalize the word can, what can I actually do about this? What is my place of my point of action? And let me know if you agree with this. I will say that a lot of times I say there are three courses of action. You do something, you do nothing, or you just retreat, step back, and then, observe and then enter the fray at another point. And all of those are legitimate options. And I'm guessing that maybe where your psyche's concerned, it's the same thing. You can do something, you can do nothing and see if things unknot themselves for you, or you can take that space, which is probably where you should start.
In the book The Reset, I talk about three options similar to what you're talking about, right? So we can keep doing what we've been doing, whether that's nothing or something. It can keep doing what we've been doing, and if it's not been helpful, we can just keep down that road, right? We can avoid and distract, right? We can do that, or we can try something different. Different is often scary.
Hmm.
It's often scary because there's unfamiliar, there's unknown, even if it's healthier, even if it's more ideal, even if it's actually moving us closer to what we want, if it's different and it's unfamiliar, it can bring up fears. It can bring up hesitations. And how we deal with that is going to come back to how do we deal with ourselves? What's the tendency with how we deal with ourselves, with how we talk to ourselves, with how we treat ourselves, with how we allow ourselves to show up for ourselves? How are we doing that?
So there are a couple of other things that I wanted to touch on here, and I think that this is really important too for people who are high achievers. You talk about how I think first of all, I think it's a persona that we end up creating for ourselves, and it feels good for quite a while because then we become identified with the success and the things that we've achieved, and yeah, that does feel good. But you said in the book that you became at some point guarded and stressed out because you didn't want anybody to see the maybe uncertainty, the tiredness, the whatever, the very normal things that we all experience. We don't want people to see that because like I said with me, oh, I'm the brilliantly resilient person. Well, I can't be struggling. And then you don't let people connect to you. And I think that that's one of the things that you talk about too, this lack of intimacy because we are maintaining this appearance.
It became an armor for me. I
Yeah.
didn't realize it. I didn't realize it, but it did. It became a source of protection for me. I grew up feeling like I never fit in anywhere. I was the mixed girl. There were no other mixed kids in my class, as far as I knew growing up. It's much different now than it was when I was growing up. I was always the overweight girl. I was a tomboy. I was always the pastor's kid. So I was that, that girl, the pastor's kid. And I moved a lot because my parents were pastors. I was just grew up feeling like I did not fit in and like I had to prove that I was worth someone's time, worth someone's attention, that I had to do something in order to be liked or wanted or accepted. And so that was, that was part of who I became, for better, for worse, or in between. That was part of my identity. It became part of how I functioned in this world. And it did create an armor for me because what happened when you grow up with that kind of expectation of self and expectation of others is that you create relationships that feed back into that belief. And so a lot of my relationships were codependent. I would help others, I'd be there for others, but I wouldn't ask them to help or be there for me. So naturally, that would leave me feeling disconnected, right? Because relationships are supposed to be two-way streets where you
Right.
can give and receive with one another. And I did not allow that receipt end of it for me. And that continued to evolve as I got older. And
So how do you break that? How do you break that cycle? Because I think it's a common one with people who are viewed a certain way by others. And even, even those who are closest to us naturally see us in a certain way because of the roles that we take on within whatever structure we're in, family, friendship, work, whatever.
yeah,
How do you move out of that? What is there,
it's a
what's the
wiring.
answer? Tell me what to do.
Well, our system gets wired to function in that way.
Mhm.
And the way the brain and body works is what we repeat over and over and over again with emotional elevation. So when our emotions are elevated, whether it feels positive or negative, it gets wired into our system. And our system is like, okay, we want to make this easy for you to do because you're doing it so often, right? And so it gets
Hmm.
wired in there. It gets wired in there. And the way to change that is to change the wiring. How do we change the wiring? The same way we wired it in the first place, through repetition, intentional repetition with an elevated emotion attached.
Mhm.
And
Okay.
so I had to, and I continue to be, this isn't some miracle switch. It was like, oh, I never get armored anymore. And I never feel like it's me, myself, and I never feel like I have to handle everything. Yeah, that still will come up for me, especially when the system gets stressed out or frustrated or scared. It wants to bring online the default systems that have been there for so long, right? So it's natural for those to come back up. But in order to shift the way that's happening, so it's not happening as often, is to intentionally, for me, was to become more vulnerable in relationship. For me, was to practice asking for help. For me, was to begin to say, I need some support. For me, was to begin to say, my wants and needs matter, and I'm allowed to express them. And that felt terrifying. Sometimes it still feels terrifying depending on who it's with.
Well, you're always afraid. I think you're always afraid, particularly if you've been the strong one, that the other person is going to reject you in another guise. Well, if I can't lean on you now, then what am I going to do? And I think that we're guilty of judging another person's response. And that may be the response, but I think at the same time, most people are better than that. And it allows other people to form a connection too, which I think we don't always recognize as having mutual value.
Yeah, I mean, when there's trauma, the system essentially anchors down into these defense mechanisms, this armoring, and like makes it even more solid, so to speak. And so, because I've had relational trauma where I did not have access to emotional support in my foundational years, my that is part of my foundation that needs to continuously be reminded that it can be okay. It can feel safe. It can be safe for me to have needs and wants and to express myself. But that there are absolutely times when it has not been safe. Right.
Right.
And we need to honor that. And we need to be able to recognize that can happen. And how are we going to support ourselves or tap into other supports if and when that does occur? Because it can happen. It's
Mhm.
not possible for us to get vulnerable and to never be heard, to never
That's
experience.
why it says that's why it's vulnerability.
Yep. Yep. Because we're all human, so we're going to mess up.
Right,
If
right,
we have
right.
the best of intentions, we're going to mess up.
Oh, I think I could talk to you for hours and hours and hours about all of this. I mean, this is like my therapy. I always say I do this podcast for myself because these are my therapy sessions. But here's where and unfortunately we have to wind up. But can you give me just a couple of tips about how to maybe begin a reset and maybe the first three steps that we can take to kind of make connections with ourselves, to kind of find out who we are and who we want to be and how we want to show up. And then please tell everybody where they can learn more about you.
Yes. So I would say one step, be willing to start small and acknowledge that that's enough.
Hmm, that's key. Acknowledge that that's enough.
It really is, because it really is. Because if it's not enough, then you will stay stuck. If you are not allowed to start small, then how will you ever really start? And if you do start and you start small, but that's not enough, then you're not going to want to continue. It it has to be enough to start small and to start where you're at. So that's step one. Step two, I think could connect with what we talked about today. Check in with yourself each morning and ask, how do I want to show up in this world today? And if you want help doing that, you can just download the free template, right? I'll send you the link. Um, print that out, print it out and use it. Use that each day. That in and of itself, we could say that, let that be the third step. Print out the template. It's free, no strings attached. Make it your own. Let that be a check-in with yourself each day. Let that help you begin to see, even if you want to reset, and then when and where. And if anyone wants to go deeper, I do have a reset course coming up specifically for high achieving, high performing moms that are managing motherhood and their purpose driven mission with their profession and their marriage, because all of these pieces connect with one another. And we are modern day women that are managing a lot. And so we get to come together. We'll have practical micro practices each and every day for 3 months delivered to your door in email form, right? In inbox form. But we also will be together live, having live sessions every week to support one another, to build community, right? And I'll be available for questions and answers. It's a really unique, one-of-a-kind space, this reset cohort for this private community. For folks that want to check that out, I'll share the link for
Yeah.
that.
And when does that start?
The doors close for enrollment on September 9th.
Okay. Well, we are going to make sure that we get this in everyone's hands well before that, because this is certainly something that we all need to be thinking about. Don't ignore those feelings that you have, that when you're doing everything you think you can possibly do and it just still doesn't seem like enough. There are reasons for that. And there are reasons that it's telling you something's not quite right. And we can amend that with some of these practices. So, oh my gosh, Dr. Toni Warner, thank you so much for joining me today. Please, 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 everybody, check out all of the links that I will be posting. Consider joining the course, the cohort. So much valuable information, and value yourself, because that's your contributions are valuable, but so are you. And if you still need a little more of some brilliance in your life, head on over to brilliantlyresilient.net. Sign up for the Brilliance Bit, of which Dr. Warner will be a part when this episode airs. And we will see you all next time on the Brilliantly Resilient podcast. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to the Brilliantly Resilient podcast. Join our Facebook group and follow us on YouTube to be inspired with tools to reset, rise, and reveal your brilliance.